All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our South Carolina Ag Disruptors webinar. This is our February webinar, so this is our monthly program that we have each month to highlight things that are going on in South Carolina and topics and things that are going on that might be of interest to South Carolina producers. So I'm Kevin Burkett with the Clemson Extension Agribusiness team, and I kind of co-host this program with someone else from the agribusiness team, Scott Mickey. So we try to identify speakers and topics that we think may be of interest to people, and again, things that could have a significant impact on the state's producers. So we try to go out and highlight different things that we think are of interest, but if there are things that you would like to hear about and things that you've become aware of that you think would be a good topic, you can certainly submit that to us and let us know, and we'll try to have them on as guest speakers as well. So we're still working on our remaining schedule for the rest of 2023. So be on the lookout for that. We'll update that schedule when we have it available. But for today's webinar, we were joined by a couple of Clemson Extension colleagues. So first we'll have Bethany Funkhouser, who is also part of the Clemson Extension Agribusiness team, and she'll be highlighting some of the women in ag programs that have been going on recently, maybe some resources related to that and how to get involved in those if you're interested in that. And then we'll have Zach Snipes of the Clemson Extension Horticulture team, and Zach will be touching on citrus growing in South Carolina, maybe what the current status of that is, maybe how to get involved if you're interested in that. And Zach will also touch on the Farming Foundations course, which is an online program that he had helped develop in the last year or so. And we had mentioned that on a previous program, but wanted to highlight today since Zach was available and online with us. So I see both of our presenters are online, and we'll go to Bethany first, and she'll highlight the Women in Ag programs, and then we'll go to Zach following that. So Bethany, you're welcome to start your video and start sharing when you're ready.
Okay. Well, let me start my video.
All right, 1 second.
Okay. Okay, there we go. All right. Hello, everyone. As Kevin said, my name is Bethany Funkhouser. I'm a part of the agribusiness team with Clemson Extension. I'm an agribusiness agent in the PD region. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about some women in ag programs. So Clemson Extension has the South Carolina Women in Ag Network program. And what that is it is multiple programs put together basically under one umbrella that are different resources available. So you have Ladies Engaged in Agriculture Development, which is LEAD. You have WOW, which is Women Owning Woodlands, and you have Annie's Project. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Annie's Project and then just about different opportunities with the Women in Ag Network. So Annie's Project is a national risk management education program that's dedicated to strengthening women's roles in modern farm and ranch enterprises. South Carolina offers the program 3 times a year. It's open to anyone interested in improving their farm risk management skills. It does require 18 hours of education. It's going to be on human resources, finance, marketing, legal, and risk production management. And the way you do this is through presentations from industry specialists and knowledge transfer through participant discussion. There is one coming up. The next class is hybrid style, though you'll be meeting 6 Thursday evenings. It'll be from 5:30 to 8:30 p.m. If you want to do it in person, it'll be in Williamsburg County at the Extension office, or you can do it online as well. And that will start on March 2nd. So if you're interested in that, the cost is $75, and there are scholarships available. If you're a alumni of the New and Beginning Farmers Program, there's a couple available, but there's also a scholarship available for anyone interested. So there's no requirements to apply for the scholarship, so anyone can do that. If you're interested in that, I will put Charlie Maxwell. She is over the Annie's Project, and I'll put her contact information in the chat when I'm finished. And then I just wanted to let you know that the Women in Ag Network also has webinars at the beginning of the Wednesday of each month. So the next one will be on March 1st at 12 o'clock. This will be more of a ask your agent. So an agent from every single program team will be there to answer questions. If you're available to attend, I'll put the link to our page below where you can sign up to attend. And if not, they also are recorded, so you can go back and watch this one or the past ones. So yeah, if you have any questions, I'll put my contact information in the chat, as well as Charlie's and the links to our pages. Thank you.
And I was going to see, Bethany, did you want to touch a little bit on the wagon conference and kind of how that went this past year?
Yes, I can do that. So in November, we had our first Women in Ag conference. The point of it, this year's theme was networking. We met at Clemson, and the first day was farm tours, and then the second day were different breakout sessions. We had topics just about in every sector of ag that you could think of. It went very well. I think we are planning the next one for the beginning of next year. So when I send out the link, there will be a spot where you can join the newsletter. And with the newsletter, you'll get updates on that as well.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, Bethany, for highlighting some of those for us. And next we'll go to Zach Snipes. And again, Zach's going to touch on citrus growing in South Carolina, and then touch a little bit on the Farming Foundations class as well. So Zach, if you have a presentation, you're welcome to share your screen.
Nope. All right, thumbs up if you see that, Kevin. Look good?
Looks good. I see the slideshow is not in presenter view yet. There we go.
All right, cool. All right, good morning, everybody. Kevin said I had about 3 hours to present this, so I'll do my best to be quick and try to squeeze it in 3 hours. No, I'm just kidding with everyone. It's hard on Zoom because you don't know, how the jokes that you throw land. So anyway, my name is Zach Snipes. I'm an area horticulture agent in the low country of South Carolina. I work with primarily fruit and vegetable growers, but I do a little research too. And today I'm going to talk to y'all about some of the citrus trials that we have going on in our Coastal Research and Education Center in Charleston. I will preface this conversation by saying these trees that you see right here in the picture, this is not how you want your citrus to look. All right, so it's the whole reason we're doing these trials is to figure out what varieties are going to do well in South Carolina. But before I start, I want to talk a little bit about the South Carolina grower. I don't know if you're aware of this, but this is a website that the food crop horticulture folks developed a few years ago. We try to make it a one-stop shop for produce growers across the state. And you can sign up at the bottom of the page. There's a subscribe button where you enter your email address. But basically, we give a crop report each week on Monday. You get it about lunchtime from every region of the state. So coastal, PD, the Midlands, the Ridge, and then the upstate area. We talk about the pests we're seeing, the crops that are growing, the weather, and then we make a lot of recommendations based on what we're seeing. So if you grow any type of produce, or maybe you're just interested, it might be good, something good to sign up for. We really want to try to keep the growers abreast of what's going on in the field. The days of us getting out and being out in the field and scouting for folks 7 days, 5, 6, 7 days a week are kind of over, unfortunately. So this is a way we can kind of get a lot of information out and keep folks proactive in the way they're managing things on their farm. So we have an upcoming events tab on this website where we have the events, obviously, that we're going to have related to fruit and vegetable production. We have a podcast that comes out bi-weekly where we got to go into depth on what we're seeing in the field. And then there's a resources tab here on the right-hand side that I'm pointing to. And this has our crop handbooks, our spray guides, and everything. And it also has the class that Kevin was talking about, the Farming Foundations class. And so, again, that website is called, if you just Google search South Carolina grower or if you just type in scgrower.com, it'll pop up. But the Farming Foundations class is a class we created. We got a lot of calls from folks who maybe inherited land, who retired, who may be older, or who may be younger, maybe getting into farming, and they don't have a traditional farming background. And as you guys know, if you farm or are involved in agriculture, it's a lot of variables. It's a steep learning curve, I would say, especially if you're really green at it. So this class is a crash course, a 101 class, essentially, to get farmers, potential farmers, up to speed on how to farm before we spend a ton of time with them, covering the basic things that everyone needs to know. So we start with soil sampling, how to use the web soil survey, how to choose the right location. We work through tractors, implements, we work through safety, we work through crop plans, and then we finish up with food safety and that sort of thing, traceability as it pertains to growing vegetables and fruits. So it's an incredible class. Farmers can take it. Folks, maybe if you're doing row crops, you're transitioning strawberries or something like that, this is still a good class. It's free, and you have 120 days to take the class. So I would love to see more folks go through this class. I think it's a valuable resource for folks. So that's all I'll say about that. I'll get into my citrus presentation now. So around coastal South Carolina, I'm out and about a lot. I see a lot of citrus trees in folks' yards, and there's a lot of experiential knowledge about different varieties and when these trees were grown. Charleston historically grew a lot of citrus. I don't know if I said peaches earlier. I feel like I did, but I meant citrus. But we historically grew a lot of citrus in the early 16 and 1700s. A couple back-to-back freezes really wiped out that industry, but we were shipping citrus all over the world in the 16 and 1700s. So you see remnants of roads named Orange Grove Road or Lemon Tree Lane and places like that. So there is a culture of citrus here, and there's a lot of old citrus trees on farms, and that's what really got me interested. Is I always had a grower or two. Well, I got a tree from the early 1900s and it produces, and so that kind of got my wheels turning. Of can we grow citrus here? I don't know if y'all are aware of what's happening in Florida. There's the disease called citrus greening, and they're literally pushing up hundreds of thousands of acres of citrus because of this little insect called an Asian citrus psyllid, and it spreads a bacterium to the citrus trees, and they get this disease, and then they get real unhealthy and basically die, and then they have a real sour, bitter, unripe fruit that they produce. So we are in a quarantine area in Charleston, Beaufort, and I believe Colleton County, and maybe just Charleston and Beaufort of citrus. Basically, that means if you bring a tree in, it has to stay in that county. It can't leave the county. But because of all the issues they're having in Florida, a lot of production is moving into South Georgia. And in South Georgia, a lot of that production is not for juice oranges, but it's for specialty market, tangerines, satsumas, blood oranges, that sort of thing. And they're getting really high demand for it in South Georgia. If you look at a map, we're really close to South Georgia as far as latitude or longitude, one of the two, I can't remember, goes. And so, there's potential for us to grow it here in South Carolina. There's a lot of markets for it. These are just a couple that we've kind of explored. A lot of the wholesalers, a lot of breweries and distilleries throughout the state. They would love to have a citrus wheat beer or citrus IPA or something. And so there's a lot of demand for it. Restaurants and bars to use it as garnishes. School districts, there's a big push to get South Carolina produce in schools. It's one thing to sell a collard or a broccoli to a school system where the staff has to be trained on it. Then they have to cook it, and then you got to convince kids to eat broccoli or collards. I think there's a huge market for the cutie type oranges or satsumas in South Carolina. There's no prep work on it, and a kid knows how to eat a cutie. Okay, so I think there's a huge opportunity there, as well as other opportunities. So this is something I could see as our climate does get warmer. And they're coming out with more and more cold tolerant varieties. That could be a big hit in South Carolina, down the road. Something to think about. Again, we have lots of experiential knowledge in the state. but we have a lot or a lack of educational or institutional knowledge, and that's, Clemson and South Carolina State. We just don't have a lot of research on this, especially the cold hardy varieties. There's a lot that goes on as far as rootstock selection, scion selection. How do we protect during real cold events like we had over Christmas? Pest management. How do we manage these pests? Is it going to be a situation like they had in Florida? And then best management practices on fertility and those sort of things. So really, we're starting from scratch developing the citrus industry, but I think it needs to be done. So we wrote a grant, the South Carolina Department of Ag, the Specialty Crop Block Grant. We kind of had 3 objectives that we needed to deliver. First, we wanted to assess the performance of cold tolerance, growth, fruit set, yield, and fruit quality of commercially available citrus species. So that's kind of the big overarching goal. And then because we're planting citrus, we do want to monitor for this pest that is spreading the citrus greening, the Asian citrus psyllid. So we monitor for that. And we put out alerts and fact sheets about that and what all that entails. And then the third thing is today was a great opportunity to present some of the research to the stakeholders and the communities in South Carolina. So those are our objectives for the citrus. These trees here I planted 2 years ago, and it's just absolutely incredible how citrus produces. I didn't want any fruit, so the recommendations on citrus is to not let them fruit for the first couple of years, to let them grow and get established before they fruit. So I thinned these trees of fruit 3 times, and this is still how many fruit escaped, which is just absolutely incredible for a tree that's only been in the field 2 years. So as you can see, we have a bunch of different varieties, and we're looking at these varieties for a bunch of different reasons. But the citrus that I see out and about, it's just unbelievable how much they produce. And it really doesn't take that many trees for someone to see a return on these things. And one of the markets, or one of the clientele I think we're trying to reach for, is we have a lot of heirs property in South Carolina. And for those of you that don't know, that's a lot of these African-American landowners who have this land and they're trying to pay taxes on it. And so we're really marketing towards those folks that you can plant 5 or 10 citrus trees and take care of them and baby them. And, you're producing a couple hundred to, 500 fruit off of one tree. And then you're selling them for 50 cents to $1 a piece per fruit. You can pay the taxes on the land and keep the land in your family for generations to come. It's a real investment. So that's one of the angles we're looking at as far as who's going to grow the citrus. So in our trial, again, this is at the Coastal Research Center in Charleston. We have 32 varieties we're looking at. We're looking at 2 different root stocks. So root stocks contribute to the cold hardiness. And we had 98 plants. I'll get to why we had past tense in just a minute. But our root stocks, we're using our Carrizo, Rubido, and then we have some that aren't grafted. And then we have about 36% of our plants are unknown. So they came to us as just a citrus tree with a scion or a top variety, but we don't know what kind of rootstock it is. So that information is valuable too. If you're ever in Charleston and you see the research center on the Savannah Highway, if you're ever out there, we put QR codes at the end of every row. So you can take your cell phone, snap a picture, and it should take you to the website with our plot plans if you're ever interested in what varieties are out there in the field. As far as varieties go, our non-grafted varieties are Changsha tangerine, I-Chang lemon, yuzu. And yuzu is really interesting. It's used in Asian cultures for cooking. There's a huge market for these. They have a special flavor and profile and smell and that sort of thing. And the Asian markets really love these yuzus. And then the Thomasville citrange quat. These are non-grafted. And the reason we chose these is we've seen Changsha tangerines as far inland as Orangeburg that have been there for 30 years. So the potential for the cold hardiness of these is just unbelievable. And so these are probably the most cold hardy varieties that we're looking at. These are the rest of the varieties that we have. We have Satsuma, Clementine, Tangerine, Mandarin group. It kind of gets the genetics get all kind of tangled up, but in a sense, think cuties. We have a couple grapefruits, a couple lemon varieties, and then some orange varieties. All right. In the fruit orchard, not only do we have citrus, but we're also looking at 26 varieties of blueberry, some fig, pear, pomegranate, pawpaw, apple, anything that's odd and niche and unique, we're planting it just because we want hands-on experience of, yeah, we've grown it and it does well or doesn't do well. I pruned pomegranate yesterday and I was very tempted to spray Roundup all over them because I hate pruning pomegranate and they just don't do well around here. But we've had them for 6 years and it's just a learning experience of what's out there and what's going to do well. So it's really good knowledge that we're gaining. I'll kind of go down a rabbit hole real quick. We're looking at blueberries. I get a lot of questions from produce growers when they have labor available, and you might have labor available between two crops, and you got to still keep the guys and gals busy. And so we're looking at different blueberry varieties to see when they're coming to market, to see if a grower calls and says, I need June 15th to July 1st, I need something for my folks to do. We can recommend a couple blueberry varieties that's going to do well to keep the labor busy. Or maybe you're a U-pick stand and you need to supplement or spread the season out if you're a U-pick operation. That's kind of what these blueberry variety trials are for, is to find your market window of when this fruit comes in. Again, same thing with the citrus. We're just looking at seasonality, when this stuff comes in. So some of the earliest stuff is going to come in October, and then, barring a freeze, you'd still be picking some citrus this time of year. I took these on November 1st. This picture here of some citrus from on the right here. We are monitoring, part of this is cold tolerance. So we are monitoring cold events with a weather station. This picture on the left of the weather station data was from 2021. It got to 22.9. We had no damage whatsoever from that. The cold event that we had over Christmas from 2022, or a few months ago, we got down to 17.5 degrees. There's definitely some cold damage, cold events. We had some species that I think are dead. It's a little too early to tell. Some are pushing out again, then they lost all their leaves. But this field data is really important to us for monitoring this and documenting what varieties did well, what varieties didn't do well. And I think if they can make it through a 17.5 degree temperature with temperatures that didn't get over 32 for 3 days, that speaks a lot to their cold hardiness. We also have a weather station project around the state where we have a weather station in every county. And so you can go back and look at the historical data from those weather stations to see, have I ever gotten to this threshold? And you can kind of predict what varieties of citrus you might be shocked that would actually do well in your area. We have these little sensors that I'm circling here in the trees. This measure temperature. So we set these sensors out in the canopy of the tree, as well as down here at the graft union of the plant in this corrugated pipe. What we're trying to do is see if there's a difference between the canopy and this temperature, because it's protected maybe a little bit. It doesn't take but half a degree to keep the tree alive. And all the citrus growers from Georgia that I've talked to, they say the whole top can die, but if that graft union is preserved, then it might be a year or two behind, but that tree will flush out again and be productive. So that's something we're looking at. Another thing, let me fast forward real quick. Another thing we're looking at that I didn't put on here is we're looking at different mulches. So there's been a lot of studies in peaches that show an addition of a compost or a wood mulch layer builds organic matter in the soil, and it promotes tree health, which then promotes vigor of the tree, and they can withstand potentially colder temperatures. So with each variety, we have a treatment within that variety where we have a wood mulch, we have a compost, and then we have a bare ground to see survivability in cold events. as well as with these little temperature meters. Is there a difference in temperature between the three mulches during cold events? And then of course we're measuring yield and growth and all those sort of things as well. So we're doing the field portion, but we're also assessing cold damage in the lab. So every month that the tree has leaves in the winter, I can't do it now because all my leaves froze off. But I sample about 30 leaves from each tree, and I send it to the lab. They punch holes with a hole puncher, and they put them in test tubes from each variety. Once they put them in a test tube, they fill it up with distilled water, which if you think back to 7th grade science class, distilled water is neutral, so it has a 7 pH. So there's no negative ions and there's no positive ions in that water. It's neutral. Then we put it in a cold water bath for a couple hours, starting at 32, and we'll go to 31, and we'll go 30 down to 15 degrees. And what happens when you put them in cold water is they lyse or bust open when they're exposed to cold temperature, and it releases positives and negatives in the water. From that water, we can measure the electrical conductivity. And so we can estimate how many of those cells are lysing or busting in the water. At the very end, once we do all the different temperature gradients, we put them in a very, very cold temperature where everything bursts in the cells. And so we have our different concentrations or electrical conductivities at different temperatures. And then we have a final electrical conductivity. And we just subtract the difference from the two. And hopefully all this makes sense. So then what we do, we plot those numbers. So the electrical conductivity on a graph at the different temperatures. And based on this graph, we're able to predict when certain temperatures that the tree can withstand. So if you look with me down here at 26, 24, 22 degrees, this is what you want to see. These cells are not leaking, they're not busting, they're not lysing, and so they're staying together. So whatever variety of citrus this was tells me that at 22 degrees, it can withstand that temperature. When you see this upward or vertical move in the graph here, this is when you start getting a lot of electrolyte leakage into that solution. So this about, in this example, about 21 degrees or so is about the tolerance of this tree to cold temperature. So anything above here means that all those cells just about are ruptured and the tree can't withstand it. So for this particular variety, we could stand, 24, 22 degrees, no problem. So we use this as a predictor on certain varieties of how cold they can withstand temperature. And this is just preliminary data. I wouldn't take this as the gospel just yet. But so far in our studies of the species we've looked at, and I didn't include all of them, this is just kind of a snapshot. Meyer lemon seems to be the one that's most susceptible to cold in the lab. I can confirm that in the field because I think I have 3 Meyer lemon trees. I'm pretty sure all of them are dead. They have not flushed out yet. They don't really show any sign of life yet. So it's kind of holding up both in the lab and the field. So I mentioned that the I-Chang and the yuzu are pretty cold tolerant. Again, 17 degrees, rarely does it get that cold, if ever, on the coast and on the sea island. So I would feel very comfortable recommending a Mayo, a kumquat, a I-Chang lemon, a yuzu, even some of the Satsuma varieties. I'd feel comfortable recommending those to folks to grow commercially. I got about 2 slides left. So I did mention citrus greening. So if you grow citrus or around citrus, this is kind of what to look for. The picture on the top is typical greening pattern. It's going to be an irregular patterning. It's not symmetrical. So if you look at the picture down below, those leaves, they kind of mirror each other along the main vein or the midrib there of the leaf. That's very typical, the picture on the bottom of a zinc deficiency or some other type of nutrient deficiency. So if I see that, if you send me a picture of that, I'm not worried. But if you send me a picture of something on the top, that's when I get a little worried that we may have the greening in fields. So we're always monitoring for this. And this is the little Asian citrus psyllid that transmits the disease. So this is not my photo, thankfully, but this is what they look like. This is what we're monitoring for. And this is a up close of what the little devil looks like. It's crazy to think something so small has caused billions of dollars worth of damage and completely upended the citrus industry. That's all I have. I think I got within 3 hours, but I'd be glad to take questions. I love doing research. I love talking about citrus. I'd be glad to answer any questions. And if you're interested in growing citrus, even if you're a little more north or a little farther inland, I think there's some varieties that might do okay. And if you could protect them from really cold events, I think you could get some citrus production in a lot of areas of the state.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. And we do have a little bit of time. We go from 10 to 11, so we have a little bit of time. And I did see a question come in, and I have one or two follow-ups as well.
Okay.
It says, is there any way in the lab to test for how long the species can survive at cold temperatures?
Yeah, that's the kicker right now is, we have those numbers of the cold tolerance, but what does that mean in terms of how long it can withstand 17? Or another thing we're looking at, the reason we're sampling these leaves each month is how the trees accumulate cold tolerance. Can they withstand 17 degrees if they've been acclimated to colder weather for 2 or 3 months? Versus, sometimes in like December, we'll get those Arctic clippers where it'll be 70 degrees and all of a sudden it turns 20. How does that affect them? And so to answer that question, I don't know. I don't know. It's very complex, this whole cold tolerance thing. So my recommendation would be to buy some citrus and try.
And I was going to ask, you may have mentioned it briefly and I mentioned it, but I missed it. But is there was a citrus expo back in the fall, wasn't there?
Mm-hmm.
And is that something y'all are planning to do again this coming year?
Yeah, so Stan McKenzie from South Carolina up in the it's in Florence somewhere. I can't remember the name of the town. Anyway, he is the proclaimed, and I give him the title of the Citrus Man. But he started that expo about 19 years ago. And it's been all over the Southeast. This year it was in Beaufort, South Carolina, or St. Helena. And I encourage everybody to go. He's gonna do one more for the 20th anniversary, and then he said he's getting out of the way and letting somebody else take it over. But it happens every year in November or early December. And we post that on our events tab on the South Carolina Grower. So if anybody's interested, even if you don't have citrus, it's a cool event because you get to meet, citrus folks tend to be a little different. And so it's a good group that are really passionate about citrus, and seeing all the varieties at the, there's like a judging of all the different varieties, and there's a best in show and all that. And it's really neat to see the diversity of citrus that's out there.
So if people wanted to keep an eye out for that, they could go to the South Carolina Grower.
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Start looking in, I don't know, September, October, and we'll post it on there.
Okay. And yeah, you were talking about schools offering oranges and things like that as a snack for kids. I had a friend recently talk about that at their school they had given out kumquats, the small oranges for kids as a snack. So they weren't sure if those came from South Carolina or not, and I wasn't sure. I don't know if you'd have any idea or not, but that was just something sort of new and different that I hadn't heard about before.
Yeah, absolutely. So if y'all don't know, a kumquat's about the size of maybe a quarter, and you eat the whole thing, and it's kind of like a Sour Patch Kid. It's super sour and then it gets sweet. You eat the rind and all. And they're marketing them towards kids because kids just pop it. It's, instead of eating a Sour Patch Kid, you eat those. There's one farm in St. Helena that grows both sour and sweet kumquats. So it's possible they came from South Carolina. That farm is about between 5 and 10 acres of citrus. which doesn't sound like a lot probably to row crop folks, but 10 acres of citrus is an ungodly amount of citrus. But there are a lot. I think Georgia has about 2,500 acres of citrus. So if they didn't come from South Carolina, then more than likely they came from South Georgia.
Yeah, and it was kind of funny because they said, the kids weren't really sure about it at first, and they weren't sure if they should peel it and things like that. And I think some of the teachers weren't sure necessarily either, but I think as a whole, they kind of enjoyed it. But like I said, it was just something different that they hadn't really seen before.
Yep, absolutely.
But if there are no other questions, we appreciate your time, Zach, and your information. So again, for updates to some of this, be on the lookout for like the South Carolina Grower blog. And if there's other programs and events that are going on, we might have another update on the Ag Disruptors webinar as well. So thanks for presenting for us, Zach. This webinar and all of our previous webinars are part of a playlist on YouTube. So if you'd like to go back and review any of this information, you're welcome to. And our next webinar will be March 15th, again from 10 to 11 a.m. And we are still setting the schedule for that, but we have reminders going out through Zoom the day before and then the day of the webinar to give you a heads up as far as the speakers and the topics and everything. So we appreciate you joining us for today, and we will hope to see you at one of the webinars later.